Luis Barragan, 1902, 1988. He lived a long life, 86 years, and he was born on the same day and on the same year with the other architect I will talk about today, Darrell Stone, Edward Darrell Stone, North American. So two Americans, although Americans like to think that just the United States is America. I think it's the wrong conception. America has several countries and not so few. And there is a North America, there is a Central America, there is a South America. So, you know, calling America just the United States is probably not totally correct. Anyway, Luis Barragan, Mexican. I found this, in fact, he said himself that he was searching for an architecture that was both mysterious and serene. And I believe this is true. I believe his architecture is indeed mysterious and attempts at arriving at serenity. And unfortunately, I started a short dialogue with Kenneth Frampton about this, and I'm afraid I irritated him because he was attracting my attention. I don't think he liked at all. In fact, I know he didn't like at all that I gave the metaphysical prize, the other Pritzker prize to Tom Main. Not because he already got the Pritzker, the real Pritzker, so to speak, but because it seemed obvious to me that Kenneth Frampton doesn't like the work of Morphosis and Tom Main at all. In fact, he criticized violently the Cooper Union building by Tom Main in New York City. But I told, and he reminded me that Luis Barragan was searching for an architecture of serenity, and which is true. But on the other hand, and I told him this, you know, he's friends with Peter Eisenman, who advocates the very opposite thing. In fact, I don't think, unless he changed at 88, but Peter Eisenman never advocated an architecture of serenity. Anyway, Luis Barragan, but sometimes we long for serenity exactly because we don't have it. So maybe a very anxious person actually is questing for serenity, but not because he has it, but because he needs it badly, perhaps. So what I'm trying to say is maybe I adventurously I state perhaps Luis Barragan had more anxiousness in him or angst than maybe Peter Eisenman. I don't know. When you are very comfortable and stable and you have an equilibrium at all levels of your life, you need instability. So you need deconstruction. But when you are deconstructed within, then you need stability and you need serenity, or at least this is what a dialectician thinks. Okay, here is the man, a solitary man. He was a very interesting man. I mean, he was an engineer. He became an architect. He built mainly, as far as I know, for himself, or in good measure. He was very, he was rich. He was affluent. But he was, I think, he was an introverted man, and this solitary figure in the field of architecture is not very common at all. I mean, painters are like this, or poets, but not architects. For an architect to, I mean, how many pictures of architects like him in this posture did we ever see? I didn't. So he was unique, and he was unique in various respects. A very interesting man and very subtle. Architecture is an art when one consciously or unconsciously creates aesthetic emotion in the atmosphere, and when this environment produces well-being. That's what he said. Now, I don't know very well what he means by atmosphere, you know, that he creates aesthetic emotion in the atmosphere, but clearly he was tempting to arrive at the level of art through his architecture. Otherwise, he would not have said what he said. Also, he was trying to, and what is interesting actually, and I thought of it today, both architects that I will talk about on this day of March, the 9th of March, tried in a way to move away from orthodox modernism. Louis Barragan, through color, he opposed the white cube. And although he liked, you know, modernism, and he was himself a modern architect, but a different kind of modern architect with very, very intense at times and even so-called strange colors, strange for someone, let's say, from Europe. In the context of Mexico, less strange. On the other hand, Darrell Stone, he sabotaged modernism, which he also liked, European modernism, through decoration. Darrell Stone didn't reject decorative elements in architecture as Orthodox modernists did. So in this, they have something in common, although the means through which they achieved what they tried to achieve were different. This is another kind of strange picture. It's too bad the resolution. I would have liked the picture to be larger. But you see the man, this aristocrat, because he was an aristocrat. He looked like an aristocrat. He built like an aristocrat. And he's hiding here in the corner of this courtyard in the shadow, that triangular shadow. And again, you know, he's an introvert, an introverted man, and architects often are not. Anyway, he says again, all architecture which does not express serenity fails in its spiritual mission. Thus, it has been a mistake to abandon the shelter of walls for the inclemency of large areas of glass. Interesting word, inclemency of large areas of glass, because the usual conception is that the large areas of glass connect us with the world, with a garden outside, with the mountains far away, with the sky. But instead, he talks about the large areas of glass as having inclemency. And, you know, this is very interesting. Here is a modern architect and an excellent architect who realized that the large areas of glass are not so benevolent, and not just in terms of losing energy that, you know, large areas of glass are quite famous for. Also in terms of the emotions that architecture generate. And I would agree with him. I think the fetishization of glass is wrong. And unfortunately, it is done all over the world, even in climates that do not recommend it at all. So I think the demagogy of glass, about which a North American architect like Andrea Kahn wrote about, is something we should assume, we should debate, because indeed glass can be demagogical. It promises us a relationship with the outside, which actually it does not deliver. It's only an illusion, because even if you have transparency, which an architect like Jean Nouvel considered to be obscene if it is total or absolute, and I would agree with Nouvel, even though maybe I wouldn't use the word he used. So really, we have to question this excessiveness that glass is so proud of, thanks to the architects of the present. But on the other hand, the world that Barragan advocates, I think should reclaim itself, or we should reclaim it. And also, maybe we should reclaim what he calls the spiritual mission. How many of us today think of architecture as having a spiritual mission? I don't think too many. You are not going to hear these words from Rem Koolhaas, nor from Bjarke Ingels. Neither will ever mention the spiritual mission of architecture. And I think this is wrong again, because we do have a spiritual life, and Barragan was aware of it. And Barragan was trying through his means, through his buildings, to not neglect what he called the spiritual mission. And I can only agree with Barragan in this statement that he made. On the other hand, I don't know if architecture is supposed to express only serenity. I don't know, but it certainly would not be a bad thing if it achieves at expressing serenity. Okay, here is another picture with a man with a rather curious expression on his face, always elegant, always. So Luis Ramiro Barragan Morfin, I don't know about that last name, you know, is, if nomen est omen, if the name is destiny, maybe that last name could mean something, but I don't know enough about the names and the language in Mexico, but I have a feeling that last name, which does not appear in general, is just called Luis Barragan, but I see he has 2 other names. Anyway, he was a Mexican architect and engineer. He was born on March 9th. I would also say he was a Mexican architect, engineer, and landscape architect or gardener, because and exactly because of this triple dimension of his work is so exciting and interesting and inspiring. His work has influenced contemporary architects visually and conceptually. Barragan's buildings are frequently visited by international students and professors of architecture. He studied as an engineer in his hometown while undertaking the entirety of additional course to obtain the title of architect. Barragan won the Pritzker Prize, the highest award in architecture, in 1980, and his personal home, the Luis Barragan House and Studio, was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2004. Barragan was born in Guadalajara, in Jalisco, Mexico. Educated as an engineer, he graduated from the Escuela Libre de Ingenieros in Guadalajara in 1923, so at 21. After graduation, he traveled through Spain and France. While in France, he became aware of the writings of Ferdinand Bach, a German-French writer, designer, and artist who Barragan cited throughout his life. In 1931, he again traveled to France with a long stopover in New York. In this trip, he met Mexican mural painter Jose Clemente Orozco, architectural magazine editors, and Frederick Kissler. By the way, Frederick Kissler, this message is to the Romanians who are here. Friedrich Kissler was Romanian, the least known Romanian and the most celebrated Romanian in the field of architecture. In New York or Paris or London or Berlin, people revere Frederick Kissler. And in the country he was born in, he is not known at all. And this is incredible. Frederick Kissler is true. He didn't recognize he was Romanian, but he was born in Cernăuți. At that time was part of Romania. He lived also in Bucharest. He knew Romanian, but he claimed that he was Austrian, Viennese, because it's true. Cernăuți had this history as also being part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and so on. But I have a monograph on him published by the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, where it is stated that he was a Romanian architect, living and working in Austria, in France, in the United States, and so on. But beyond the nationalism, it is important to know Frederick Kissler. And to realize his importance is to know that the foundation Frederick Kissler in Vienna, is in the closest proximity to St. Stephen's Cathedral, right in the center of Vienna. Now, to have your own foundation in such a prestigious place, in such a prestigious city, is not a little thing. So I allow myself at this moment to underline the name Frederick Kissler, especially for the Romanians here, who is very, very possible, do not know of him. He deserves to be known. He was a force in architecture and design, although it's true he didn't build too much and maybe not as gloriously as his total work is. But all in all, he's a very important and very beloved, actually, presence in modern architecture and avant-garde architecture and design. He taught at Columbia University a course on correalism, and I like the word very much, to correlate. It is about bringing things together, to correlate. Anyway, enough with Frederick Kissler, although I will talk also about another architect born in Romania. This is a chance for me to be a little bit patriotic. I apologize for it. I hope I will not be so in a disturbing way. But we'll arrive at Yanis Xenakis soon. So in France, he briefly met Le Corbusier and finally visited the gardens realized by Ferdinand Bach. He practiced architecture in Guadalajara from 1927 to 1936 and in Mexico City thereafter. So this is the man, always elegant. I mean, look at his shirt. I mean, look at the, it was ironed impeccably. I mean, as I said, an aristocrat, and a very interesting man, really, Luis Barragan. He deserved the Pritzker. Again, look at the engineer. I would trust an engineer who also writes poetry and who builds that stair, that you will see that stair in his own home, which is rather a sculpture in a way. Anyway, again, Luis Barragan, the second Pritzker Prize laureate, and slim and fit for living a long life. You know, the conception about Mexico that, it was advanced by the ex-president of the United States is a wrong one. Mexico is not, Mexico is not a country of, immigrants and drug dealers and, thieves and so on. Not at all. I had been once there and I met a lot of dignity there and very intense and interesting people, and they have an old culture and they have excellent architects, not just Barragan. In fact, we had here on the Zoom platform a friend of one of our friends on Zoom, Bruce Danziger, Mexican architect, who I actually wrote once about him. He runs Taller de Arquitectura. I think it's called so in Mexico City. A very good architect. What is his name now? I have to. I run in trouble now because I navigate. I meander between so many names.
Are you thinking of Enrique Norton?
Yes, Enrique Norton. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I know him as well. He's very good.
Yes, he's excellent architect. Yes, and maybe through Bruce we'll be able to invite him to present his work here. Maybe we'll see. Okay, some drawings of Luis Barragan. He drew. I don't know what to say. I think poetically and discreetly, but he uses these. I don't know if they are color pencils or thin pastels or maybe even markers. He was truly, if there ever was, I'm sure there was, yes, any great architect, any good architect is a thinking architect. But he was, in his case, you can truly feel his thoughts somehow. He didn't build a lot, but every gesture that he made in architecture is thought out, is scrupulously, condensed into its essential reality. Well, we'll see when we look at his buildings. But the engineer, as you can see, was advocating, and in fact, he did explicitly an emotional architecture. And I hope I have here a statement by him about this. Emotional architecture. He was against the proposal of Le Corbusier, machine à habiter, a machine for living. He thought that architecture should be emotional. And I agree with him. I totally agree with him. Otherwise, architecture would not be architecture. It has to be emotional. It has to provoke emotions. It has to aspire towards the heart of man and not just the brain or the body. Another drawing by him. Nature is always exquisitely present in the vicinity of his architecture. In fact, I even wonder if when he built, if he didn't yet start by contemplating the nature, the trees, the grass, the flowers, the bushes, whatever it was in the proximity, and I mean natural, in the proximity of what he built. And in this respect, he's also a great lesson for us. You know, usually architects start building and then fill the space around the building with what we might call gardens or landscape architecture or whatever. But the garden always comes afterwards. But what if we start with a garden and build the house in such a way that we accommodate the house to the reality and spirit of the garden? In other words, start first with a tree and then build the wall, and not the other way around. And unfortunately, often we build the wall by cutting down the tree, which we cannot continue to do, not now. We'll see the building here that is truly a masterpiece. And this one as well. You know, some sketches have a certain naivete, I agree, but I think there is a purity of thought in the case of Luis Barragan that we should be very, very aware of. Now, we read that, you know, he studied somehow mysteriously architecture. I don't know, it wasn't very clear, you know, how he was an engineer and he had an interest in architecture and he took some courses. I don't know exactly, but who cares, you know? He arrived at architecture because he was animated by emotions and by a quest for spirit, for his spirituality. But the rigor of the engineer was present. So this meeting between poetical longings and the rigor of his training generated an architecture that is extremely simple and extremely complex at the same time. I'm still studying it. I'm not, you know, I don't have a PhD in Luis Barragan, but I want to grow with it. And maybe the next time when I will talk about him, I will know more about this architect because he does deserve it. Now, this is this work. I don't know exactly its functions. Its function from 1955. So he was already 53 years old. You know, we could say he began just like Louis Kahn began when he was over 50 as an architect. This is, when I saw this image, now when I prepare this PowerPoint presentation, I thought of a great film by Akira Kurosawa. I feel that here, I don't know exactly if I can improvise now something that is not foggy in the way I formulate it. But it moves me very much, this image. I didn't see the work there in Mexico, but I saw it in books and so on. The level of abstraction is very high. I see somehow the tension between man and nature, you know. I mean, they attempt to cohabitate. They attempt to, I mean, nature doesn't attempt to cohabitate with us, but we attempt to cohabitate with nature. The work of man is in some kind of a tension with nature, but I would never say what the Dutch architect said, that you know, we can outsmart nature. Certainly here, Luis Barragan is not attempting to outsmart nature, but nature is I don't know very well how to put it. Is I cannot call it a background either, but what he did here, Luis Barragan, through this you know, container filled with water, it's really, he arrives at abstraction. It's pure abstraction, but realized with matter. The wall is made with matter. The water is the water. The container that contains this is made by man. It's a magical work, I think. I don't know what its function is really. I don't know. I should know, but I cannot read Japanese or whatever is there. So it remains for the future to continue to investigate. This was the first work I found that is, you know, connected with him. And I knew of it, and it is published in many books because it is an important work by him. But actually, his works are rather mysterious because I don't know very well. I think some of them, I mean, I know some of them are built for himself. He built for himself. I don't know if this is one of those works. I don't know what it is. Maybe some kind of a club, or I don't want to insult the building because it doesn't deserve at all to be insulted, but you know, to be called a club. I know he worked also for you know, hybrid functions, not just houses, not just park, both you know, garden, park, house, with some public elements. I do not know what this building was made for, but what I see in terms of architecture aesthetically is very provocative. It's very simple, yes, but at the same time, it is complex because you wonder. I mean, in a way, John Ruskin was right. The most beautiful things in life.
Mă uit la Kazan și atunci vă duc.
Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Please turn the microphone off if you are so kind. Thank you. So, you know, John Ruskin said that the most beautiful things in life are the most useless. I imagine this piece of water here, it's also useless. I don't know, unless it is something where horses could drink from or some animals. He was very fond of animals, Luis Barragan, and he did build a few things where, you know, you could say that the main beneficiaries were animals. It's possible. I never saw pictures with animals, you know, drinking water from this, but what would its function be? Whatever it is, aesthetically is beautiful, especially when it is filled and it's like this, you know, it's this reflection of the sky on the earth, on this liquidity, on this liquid, which is perfect, perfectly horizontal surface, black, or it depends, you know, how the sky reflects, is reflected by this surface of water. And then the trees, majestic, you know, guarding this channel of water. I apologize that I do not know the function of what we look at, but aesthetically, please be kind and turn off the microphone. Otherwise, I'm forced to start again the presentation, and I cannot do this. There is a noise in the background. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. Now, there were sculptors, you know, contemporary sculptors, Carl Andre and others, who would have done work that is very similar to what we see here. But this is an architect and an engineer and a poet, because I'm sure he was a poet. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. How many times do I have to say it? Oh, thank you. Now we arrive at the house of the architect, his own house, the one that was recognized by UNESCO and is considered highly to be part of the heritage, the UNESCO heritage. Built between 1947 and 1948. So he actually built it before what we saw initially. I'm sorry, I have to do this. I said it many times, and sorry about this. Okay, let me see, still recording, yes. Okay, so the house of the architect in Mexico City. Let me these interruptions agitate me a lot. Please be kind. If you respect what I'm trying to do, please do not use the microphones, because I don't read. I have to be careful with what I say. So any noise in the background agitates me, and I become even more vulnerable than I actually am. Okay, so this is the house. Very interesting. This architect, who was an engineer and who was very capable of mental rigor, I think his plans, his architecture is one of the most labyrinthical that I ever saw, especially in talking about a modern architect. There are all kinds of functions here that interlock, and it's almost difficult to read. So let me try now, and I never try this, but let me try together with you. So it is a garage here, open towards the street, a vestibule. So you enter, I guess, yes, you enter, or I see another vestibule here. He has two entrances. One is like this, the vestibule, you enter a hall, and then God, all these functions here, little functions, even a bathroom oriented towards the street. How come they gave him the Pritzker Prize? This is taboo in certain schools of architecture. You cannot, and it's also very close to the entrance door. So the students who studied in Bucharest, they know what I'm talking about. This is totally unacceptable in the schools in Romania. But look, the Pritzker Prize jury didn't mind it at all, nor Luis Barragan. So anyway, yeah, so in this labyrinth, there is a dining room in the front, and then there is a kitchen here, but there are several doors. So if you cook here and you serve the food here, you have to navigate between various. I'm becoming a functionalist. What a bore. So you have here the breakfast room. There is even a breakfast room. As I told you, he was an aristocrat. So he had a large kitchen, he had a breakfast room, he had a dining room for several people, and then this hallway, and then here is the living room and the library, a large library. And then there is a connection with the second part of the house, with another entrance, the vestibule, the secretary's office. So he had also a secretary, the introverted poet, nice, an office, and then the big studio. Yes, this is the first floor, but then I see a stair here and a stair here. We'll see pictures of this. Actually, it's very interesting. We'll see, please be kind and remember this plan with the library, because we are going to see this beautiful stair that he built inside the library. Okay, we made a little incursion into his house, which is a UNESCO part of the UNESCO heritage. Now, this stair should we look? It must be this one here in plan, which I don't know where it goes. I hope we have, I have also the second floor plans. Luis Barragan was truly a master of handling the light and giving texture to the walls. He loved the walls, as we already know. But although he has a few large windows as well, we are going to see them, but only in specific cases and locations. He also loved to give color to the walls, or different textures, either a more rough texture or a more smooth texture. Towards the outside, the house is very unassuming, and this is a quality. He didn't want to advertise himself as the aristocrat he was. You know, his houses, you could have passed by this house. Now, of course, these people are gathered in front of his house because now this is a museum and, you know, UNESCO heritage and, you know, it's a famous house. But when he built it, he wanted to be discreet. There are books, not this is one of them, the Barragan house, about this famous house that he built for himself. I know that it is said that the shoemaker doesn't make shoes for himself. Not always. Sometimes the shoemaker makes beautiful shoes for himself, and architects sometimes build beautifully for themselves. The courtyards are also advocating the sculptural quality of walls. The colors are there for all to see. And I read that maybe the presence of colors is caused not just by his connecting his buildings with the local culture, but also with the flowers that he was so very fond of. There is always some vegetation, but there is also the abstraction or abstractness of his walls. So there is this dialectic between the wall and the green, between nature and man or his house. This is that stair that I don't know where it leads, but this stair is one of the most famous stairs in the history of architecture. Is present in many publications about Luis Barragan, and it is in his library. I don't know who did that painting. It's almost like a Mark Rothko, but it's not Mark Rothko. Anyway, you see the man who wrote against the large pieces of glass. Well, you know, as someone told me, you know, never trust what architects say. Well, this is the accident that confirms the rule, so to speak. So he does have himself a large piece of glass in the living room. Okay. Light also is very important in his architecture. I understood he furnished his apartment, his house with objects he found in, I don't know, antique stores and flea markets and so on, and that they are all belonging to the local culture, to the Mexican culture. And I think Barragan's architecture is indeed glocal, to use that Swedish word that was the word of the year a number of years ago. In other words, it is local, it belongs to the Mexican culture, but it is also global because it reaches the hearts of everybody through the emotions it generates. And I think this conjunction between localism and globalism, or maybe I should just get rid of the ISM, just the local and the global is what makes a work of art, you know, distinctly valuable. You see, this is the house of the Pritzker Prize laureate towards the street. I don't know if that car was his, probably not. Maybe I never saw a picture with him like I saw with Le Corbusier and even Frank Lloyd Wright enjoying themselves narcissistically in a beautiful car. It's very possible Luis Barragan didn't drive. I don't know. But his house, as you can see, is very unassuming, to say the least. But once you enter it and you go, you cross it and you move towards the garden, magic begins to reveal itself. So this is how it is towards the street, and this is how it is towards the garden. And it's possible he also designed the garden because he had a deep interest in landscape architecture, and in fact he did a few works himself. Unfortunately, most of the landscape design that he was involved with, the pictures I found are in black and white, which is not totally satisfying, but maybe I didn't search enough. Anyway, now we see some of the other floors. So the stair that I said is very publicized goes to a mezzanine, and you know, here we see other little rooms and functions. You know, it's truly very labyrinthical. So you arrive in the mezzanine, and then there is a guest room here, and there are little bathrooms and another stair here, and the afternoon room. Can you believe it? He had an afternoon room. Now, who has rooms like this? You know, the morning room, the afternoon room, the evening room. This is, as I said, we are talking about a sophisticated aristocrat. This is the master bedroom. And but I'm intrigued by this room, and I truly feel there is inspiration to be found here. I like very much the idea to have a room dedicated to the afternoon. This is very uncommon, really, because I think what this room shows is that this man, Luis Barragan, was a contemplative man. I mean, only a contemplative man would need a room for the afternoon. You know, let's think a little bit about this, the afternoon room. And here is another office anyway, but here you arrive from a different place. There is a division here, you see, between one side of the house. This seems to be more private, and the other one, this part connected more with, you know, with his work. The studio is underneath, and so on. Also, it seems the library had a double height, but this cluster of many little functions, you know, and you see here several stairs as well, and the dressing room. I have to study it more carefully, but it is an intriguing house. And then it has another floor, the third floor, with service area, or is it in the basement? No, it has a terrace. A large terrace. So actually north is to the right, not as it, you see the arrow is pointing towards right, not towards up. So actually the main elevation is towards east mostly, and this is west here. Okay, I am learning about this building live in front of you. Okay, this is the second floor again, but drawn by someone else. So this is the stair that I mentioned, and we saw a picture of, and we are going to see others, and then the other functions and so on. Okay. I don't know, this is a chimney. I don't know what it is. Let's look in the plan, because I actually plan to, I don't know what is there. I don't see a chimney. Could it be that the stair, these spirals, becomes this imposing volume? I don't know. But it is a moving architecture, and you see the duality towards the street, very unassuming, and then color almost explodes on the other side, towards the west. The stair that I mentioned a few times, which is, of course, the functionalists would protest. Not only that it is very narrow, not only that it seems rather fragile, but I mean, I don't know what to say about it. You know, you have to be rather careful when you use it. But he was a slim man, so I don't think he had problems in this sense. I truly miss these phones, these fixed phones, you know, this. I miss them really. I'm so tired of the of the mobile phone. I really, why should we carry a phone all the time with us? Why? It's absurd. I mean, you know, should we communicate always? I mean, always on the street, in the subway, in the when we swim, whatever we do, we have to have the phone on us. Why? I don't know. I feel manipulated by Vodafone, Orange, and so on. This phone, I could trust. Is here. I know it is here, and it will remain there. I like those phones, but yeah, it is double height here. And now you see now the door is open, and yes, you go into the mezzanine there and so on. Nice library. I mean, the picture seems to be taken from where the actual library is, from where the books are. The not so small glass, I mean, window, glass window. Well, could the window be any other way? Anyway, he also loved, like Le Corbusier, he loved containers, you know, how are they called? Vases, not vases. There is another word which I can't find now. Vessels, ceramic vessels, Mexican vessels, ceramic work. They are beautiful, it's true. And I don't...
Urns, maybe.
Pardon?
Urns, maybe. URN.
I don't know, maybe. Anyway, Le Corbusier, when he visited the Eastern Europe and even crossed into Romania on his way towards Greece and so on, I read that he actually sent to Switzerland such objects that he collected, specifically in Serbia. He was in love with them. So I read that he bought them and sent them to Switzerland. They are beautiful. It's true. I love them too. Anyway, you see what wall here? I mean, what color? And he uses pink all the time, even a pink cross, if you can imagine, in a chapel. You are going to see it, a pink cross. This is, yes, it's Mexico. It's Mexico. It's, they have a different, you know, the sense of chromatics, but I think it's more than just that. I think it's something else. I have my own theory, which I will not divulge right now, but anyway, sorry, these plans are, they should not have been here actually any longer, because we were able to decipher the initial plan. So widely recognized for his emphasis on color, light, shadow, form, and texture, it can only be expected that the former residence of Pritzker Prize winner Luis Barragan encompasses all of his trademarks. On its street in Mexico City, the stark facade of the house humbly blends in with its neighbors, giving no hints to the personality of its interior. Its is written wrongly. I notice this all the time, and I speculate. Many people spell wrongly its because of its two functions and its roles. And I have my theory about this, that it's about a confusion between having and doing. It is, or being and doing. No, being and having. It's, anyway, I should not get into this, but maybe with another occasion. The most prominent aspects of the design of Casa Barragan are the use of flat planes and light, both natural and artificial. The skylights and windows allow for visual tracking of light throughout the day. The floods of natural light and views of nature are the key purposes of the windows. Opening up into the garden, the back of the house creates a visible and physical relationship between the lower level and the backyard. Barragan often called himself a landscape architect because he placed as much emphasis on the exterior and surroundings of a building as he did on the interior. True. I would say that Luis Barragan was somehow a little bit like that mollusk that Bachelard talked about, who doesn't build the house to live in, but lives in order to build the house. I have a feeling that this house came into being rather slowly, and you know, everything took some time, even finding certain furnishings. I feel the time. I feel time is organically connected with the coming into being of this house. Upon entering, the visitor walks down a dark hallway until they suddenly, now we know it has two entrances, but maybe it refers to the personal part of the house, so to speak, the private part. The visitor walks down a dark hallway until they suddenly encounter a pink wall, the first engagement with the known style of Barragan. Now, not too many architects use pink. He was one, though, who used it very, very convincingly. The only function of this main room is to use the telephone, but it is still characteristically lit and decorated with simply a chair and a table, neither of which have changed location in the last 50 years. I love this. The double height space of the main room is separated only by lower partition walls, which separate the space into different areas. On the roof, a window is accentuated by the use of wooden girders. You know, he even has this strange object where he can display either pictures or books. And he was a contemplative, clearly. And again, not too many architects, and not just architects, allow themselves to contemplate too much in our time, but he did. Now, of course, he was held by the fact that he was doing well and he didn't have to so-called earn a living. But there are other people who are even more affluent than he was, and they refuse contemplation. So it's not just because he wasn't doing well that he was contemplative. The play of privacy and visibility are seen throughout the front and back halves of the house. Towards the front, high windows are used to let light in but maintain privacy, whereas large windows open up towards the back of the garden, open up back to the garden. Since the back of the house opens up to private space as opposed to the public street at the front of the house, Barragan is able to manipulate the windows accordingly. We'll see the picture. Barragan had a fascination with animals, particularly horses. So many relics of popular culture and symbols are found throughout the house. Crosses can also be found in multiple rooms, which, coupled with the bold colors used by Barragan, create a mythical and spiritual architecture. Again, how many of us think of creating a mythical and spiritual architecture? Not too many, I'm afraid. He found many of his furnishings at craft markets and antique shops, all true to the cultural identity of Mexico. This cultural flair is also apparent in the bold pink, yellow, and lilac colors chosen by the architect. The minimalist style gives reason to the significance of detail. Every aspect of the house has its purpose and is obviously planned by the architect. The purist, I don't know what this is, the purist of stairs, maybe the purest of stairs, or I don't know. Whoever wrote this is probably translating into English from Japanese. Led visitors through the other stories of the house towards private bedroom and studio spaces. The colors and simplistic designs I would say, simple designs, are carried out through each level, even out onto the terraces and roof. Barragan discovers a poetry in architecture, straying from the standard and conventional line and creating a unique style that distinguishes who he is as a person and architect. He fuses his personal experiences, dreams, and memories into a physical experience that is shared throughout cultures and ages. I didn't write this, but anyway, I see now, I don't know how to get rid of these. They keep showing up. Okay. Luis Barragan accepted the Pritzker Prize in 1980, and upon his death in 1988, Casa Barragan became a museum to be enjoyed by the public. The house became one of UNESCO's World Heritage Sites in 2004. We know this already. Now, I couldn't find pictures for this, I think. No, I did, but in black and white. Jardin de Pedregal, as he himself considered, he was also a landscape architect. And this distinguishes him from many architects, because many architects, if not most of them, leave that work for a specialist. But I think an architect who also considers very, very seriously and affectionately what is outside of the house is a very good architect. Of course, it's not easy to do this all the time, but look here, we have the architecture, which is abstract, but the landscape is rather wild and is interesting. I don't know if he worked alone, or this side of his work is still not sufficiently known by me. But I'm very interested in this because I value a lot, working with nature. Although myself, I don't do it. I should do it though. But I value it, like a coward from the outside, with just contemplating the work of others. I'm not proud of it, but this is what it is for the moment. Anyway, if it is true that we can learn a lot from nature, and both Wright and Le Corbusier said the same thing, in the case of Barragan, is not only that he learned from nature, he also worked with nature. And, what I see in these pictures is an appreciation for the Dionysian side of nature, so to speak, the wild nature, the nature that is untamed by man. And it's possible nature is at its best, or her best, when it is untamed. On the other hand, the buildings are, distinctly human and geometrical and so on. The two sides, you see them clearly in this picture, nature and man. Now this chapel, which is one of his best works, is magnificent because it is a religious building, although there are religious elements, so to speak, within his houses as well. The cross appears, as we already know, the mysterious atmosphere that he tried to create, trying to fuse together, to fuse the mystery or the mysterious with the serenity he was searching for. Sorry for this plan. I hope I have a better picture of the plan. Yes, I do here. Again, it is a little bit, and I myself didn't study the plan. I didn't analyze it, but I could attempt to analyze it together with you. The first thing I noticed is that but maybe this is done intentionally. I know in the schools of architecture, we are taught to open the door the other way. So when you enter, you actually see the whole room which is inviting you, but he opens it the opposite way. So when you open it, you actually see this wall. You don't see the room. Maybe he did it. I don't know. Either because he didn't know, the ABC of architecture as it is taught in the schools of architecture, or he did it intentionally, so to protect in a way, the people who sit on these benches and attend the religious service. It's possible. This seems plausible. Yes, the interest is from here through a narrower door than this one. This is also interesting. You see there are small doors here. This is the largest door. And they should be in a way, because this is the main room, the chapel itself. And you are going to see, here is the cross, a pink cross, if I'm not mistaken. And the way the light falls on this cross is magical. Let's look at some pictures. Again, is the same plan, but a better resolution. It's not clear to me what the orientation is here, but maybe we'll discover this together. I should have studied. It's my problem, and I apologize. I didn't study the plan by myself, and now I'm a little bit embarrassed because I cannot explain exactly where this is in the plan. Because yes, his plans are so. There are these intricacies. It's a little bit difficult they don't open up immediately. Like you need to dig in. You need to do some work in order to understand where you are. Maybe we will. For example, where is this? Well, I know there is a courtyard. I don't know. Maybe should it be? Maybe it's here. I don't know. I'm lost, and I shouldn't be lost because I'm supposed to be some kind of how do you call it? Anyway, maybe I should just shut up and look. Invite you to look at the pictures. But I am tempted to say certain things because I like the unconventional use of colors. How many people would use such colors in a religious building? But color is supposed to mean life and richness, I like the fact that he uses these colors, these strong colors. On the other hand, like in this picture, it's so obvious that he achieved that mysterious serenity, or the mysteriousness he was searching for, and also the serenity. It is an excellent work of architecture, truly very, very poetical, done with simple means, but in no way simplistic. Also, it's interesting that you see the cross is not centrally displayed, but on the side. I wonder what the nun is praying to or towards. Maybe we'll discover that. Yeah, towards here, we see from the benches here. The work is an abstract work of architecture, but its poetry derives exactly from the intense abstractness or abstraction that he arrived at. And on the other hand, it is not a cold abstraction. Light is invading the space in this very, I would say, inspired way, in this poetical way. It is fragmented. It is discrete. It is impressionistic, and yet the yellow wall, if we are to call it a wall, manifests itself chromatically with a certain power. We remember now in the plan where this is, and the light comes through that special windows, narrow and long, and it almost looks like a stained glass window. And then the cross is pink, you know. I mean, it's probably the only pink cross in the world architecture. But I see in different conditions of light, it changes. It seems to be a different color. I don't know. This is so here is the cross. Here is the window that I just mentioned, narrow and tall. And this is the actual, liturgical space. A little bit difficult to see, but slowly we are beginning to understand what's going on here. I still wonder where this courtyard is. Yes, it is pink all right, the cross. Even from this picture, I think we have to conclude that yes, he arrived at that mystery and that serenity he was searching for. Now, why didn't he use a window that was, just one piece of window without any kind of divisions? Why did he complicate himself to? There must be some meaning in this, It is, in a way, a reference to maybe, an abstracted version of a minimalist version of the stained glass windows in traditional churches, and also a modernistic one, without actually having a narration on the glass. But the fact that the glass is made up of these fragments, you see, these are sophisticated things. This man, this architect, this engineer, this landscape architect, he thought deeply about what he was building. This is not by accident that he made this window in this way. And it's probably the only window like this in this space, in this chapel. Now, I'm a little bit unsatisfied. I have to confess. I wish I knew a little bit more about this, but maybe the next time when we pay homage to him, I will be able to explain for myself first and to others other things relating to this chapel. This house, the Galvez house from 1955. Again, we see the beautiful ceramics that he loved, and the pink that he loves. This color pink, which has certain connotations, but and it's possible they might not be untrue, those connotations. Here we see again the large window with a cross. Again, the cross is present as often as the pink color. Sorry about that's how I found it. It's not that I enlarged it. The picture was like this, the way I found it. If you can somehow forgive me for it and distance yourself from the screen, and maybe you can read the plan. This house is not very well documented. I don't know why. Maybe it's not considered one of his masterpieces. I couldn't find a lot of pictures with this house. But we still see a multitude of rooms here and doors and this labyrinthical character of that he employs in the other buildings. The pictures themselves are very convincing. The choice of the materials, you can tell he didn't ignore at all the materiality of the building, but the design itself is reduced to essentials. Although his architecture is not a minimalist architecture. No, he was not a minimalist. And not just because he used colors, but although he used a simple architectural language, but I wouldn't call Barragan a minimalist. Although he worked with essences, it's true, but should we call an essence something that is minimalist or minimal? I don't know. I wouldn't say so, because an essence is a condensation of something, and as such is maximalism in a way, not my minimalism. The pink room. This is a model, but it's hard to, unless you know very, very well the plan, it's hard to evaluate it or to explain anything here. I can't at this moment. But I think it's important to have an overview of his work based on what we already saw. You see even these steps, you know, the conventional functionalists would protest. They don't have, I mean, they are, but we shouldn't listen to the conventional functionalists, really. Architecture is not as simplistic as that. It might not appear here. By the way, I remember, and I said it when I presented Luis Kahn, when I presented the Salk Institute in La Jolla by Luis Kahn, and they were friends, Barragan with Luis Kahn. And Luis Kahn showed him that he wanted to create kind of a garden in between the two rows of buildings. And Barragan advised him not to use vegetation at all. And the critics and the experts think that it was the good advice that Kahn listened to. He didn't use any vegetation. Now, we see that Barragan was not at all indifferent to the green, to the nature, to trees and so on. But in that case, and I understood Barragan also advised other architects. He was very valued for his advice in the field of landscape architecture, because he had a lot of interest in landscape architecture and even practiced it himself. I don't know, I hope not Luis Barragan wrote number 2 here on this tree. So I'm sure it wasn't him. Anyway, yes, the pink room. I didn't quite like pink myself, but maybe by neglecting color pink, I neglected a certain side of myself. I don't know. The otherness of pink is something that some people are aware of. But in the case of Barragan, pink is distinct, characteristic of his work. Other gardens, I think here, yeah, here I couldn't find pictures, sorry. And now we go to this very important work by him, where he worked with Matthias Goeritz, a painter and a sculptor, and a very monumental and significant work for Mexico City. Here are the towers before they. I'm a little bit confused because they're actually colorful themselves. But I found this material in an essay, which I don't know. It was a proposal to build some kind of mausoleum for the architects and artists who worked on this project. Here they are: Luis Barragan, 1902, 1988, Matthias Goeritz, 1915, 1990, and then Jesus Reis, 1880, 1977. I don't know who he is. But so the mausoleums, I found this on Espacio Cero, Mausoleums for Barragan, Goeritz, and Reis, the interior forgotten space of the Torres de Satellite in Mexico City become mausoleums where could be located the remains of Louis Barragan, Matthias Goeritz, and I think it's a project that was not realized, but is an interesting one. Emotional architecture is a style of modernist architecture conceived in the 1950s that embraced space, color, and light, creating buildings that encourage meditation and reflection. It was conceived by the Mexican architect Luis Barragan and the sculptor and painter Matthias Goeritz, who were frustrated by the cold functionalism of modernism. In 1954, Barragan and Goeritz published the Emotional Architecture Manifesto, in which they argued that architecture needs to be spiritually uplifting. I personally think we should write another manifesto exactly in the same spirit, and with maybe with the very same title, the Emotional Architecture Manifesto. I think we need badly to bring emotions back and to stop being those calculating brains that do a very cold so-called architecture, which is in fact not architecture. Because if you deprive architecture of spirituality, you arrive at prose, and prose not in its noble sense, because there is a noble sense associated with the word prose as well. But I think we should aspire towards poetry. This, you might almost say that is a chapel built by Peter Zumthor. It's the interior of one of those towers. So Torres, the satellite towers, Mexico's first urban sculptures and great example of emotional architecture, had its planning started in 1957 with the ideas of Luis Barragan, painter Jesus Ferreira, and Matthias Goeritz. The project was originally planned to be composed of 7 towers, with the tallest one reaching a height of 200 meters, my God. But a budget reduction forced the design to be composed of only 5 towers, with the tallest measuring 52 meters and the shortest 30 meters. And again, pictures of this project, which I don't think was realized, but the towers were built. With all this in mind, we propose to use, so the people who proposed this project, to propose to use the interior space of the satellite towers as mausoleums to place the urns of Barragan, Goeritz, and Reis to commemorate their great artistic legacy. For each tower of the urban sculpture is assigned an internal function that does not alter its artistic and social nature, but that activates a sequential procession through the square. The lower tower, the Tower of Silence, contains a chapel that keeps the mystical religious spirit of its creators. The 3 towers, red, blue, and white, are dedicated as mausoleums for the 3 artists, Luis Barragan, Matthias Goeritz, and Jesus Reis. The towers of remembrance, where the urns are located. The tallest tower, I should have placed this material after showing the pictures. But you'll see the pictures immediately after I finish reading this. Offers a place where people can see the entire city as a symbol of mystical ascent. The word mystical shows up here twice. Yeah, it's a project made by some architects to create the mausoleums for the 3 architects in 3 of these 5 towers that were built, which initially were planned to be 7. But the 5 were built, and you are going to see them. And we see, Barragan was supposed to be in the first tower, and then Matthias Goeritz, and then the 3rd artist here. And you see a picture now from the tallest with a stair, with a lady taking pictures of the clouds. Now we see the towers as they were built, and I think they are magnificent. And how do you explain that this big city, one of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest in terms of population, which is accused by certain presidents that it belongs to a country which is not as advanced as their country. The truth is, this shows sophistication, it shows modernity, it shows the ability to assume at a public level. This is not in the courtyard of some eccentric artist. This is at the entrance or the exit of Mexico City, look at the huge highways, and they assumed abstract art to symbolize the entrance or the exit into the city. This shows again cultural sophistication, because it is abstract art and it is symbolic art. It is an art that is not, just throwing in some forms, and they are huge. They are huge, and you imagine they plan to have one 200 meters tall, but that one was built. But nevertheless, they built one that the tallest is 50 meters tall, and unfortunately, yes, we see the ubiquitous beer, the famous Mexican beer here. What can we do? It's capitalism. We have to sell. But these towers represent a different value. They represent different values. They represent the values of culture, of spirit, of emotions. So forget Corona, although some beers could increase the certain emotivity or emotionalism. But anyway, it moves me to see the power of abstract art, of genuine art, being able to insert itself within the city, although it is surrounded by other values, as we can see. What can we do? But still, we have to appreciate what the city did, because the city built this. This is the plan, and you see that it has a certain sophistication in terms of the planning. I don't know, and I can't read very well what's going on there, but the architect, meaning Barragan, who was supposed to be housed here, I mean, his remains in the mausoleum that was planned, he probably did this drawing as being the engineer and the architect of the group. They look exciting from wherever they are seen. Somehow they look smaller in some pictures, but they are actually big, and monumental and tall. It moves me when I see cases where a few artists together, they group themselves together, they collaborate, and they create something for everybody. Where art, in a way, it wins the fight with banality and with mercantile interests and so on. And that's what we see here: pure art winning the battle with mercantilism. And it is possible. It is possible. Brâncuș did it in Târgu Jiu with his endless column. Barragan and his friends did it here in Mexico City. It is possible. We just have to persevere. We have to try. But it is possible. It is a triumph of the spirit. That's what it is. Okay, now another work, excellent work. This is a work done mainly not for men, but for horses. And there are almost mythical images taken in this complex that Barragan built for, I would say, mainly the animals, the horses. It's some kind of a stable. I don't know what it is. But you see, he brought very sophisticated and poetical architecture in the vicinity of a function that no one would think of honoring poetically with. We saw this plan before where I didn't know. So I guess, I don't know, I'm confused. Could it be that it's part of the same complex? Or you remember the first work that I showed with that horizontal content? It's possible, because I had this feeling that water might have served a function to be used by animals, by the horses. It's a very pure architecture, really. I mean, it doesn't matter where you photograph it from. It is like a film by Andrei Tarkovsky. It is architecture. It has a function, but that function is diluted it becomes somehow blurred by other meanings, higher meanings in a way. And look at those beautiful horses, you know, enjoying the water and the water that falls into this big basin, and it's very nice. Obviously, this was built by a man who understood the horses, who understood water, who understood space. Uh, it's really an homage to life. It's an homage to the unity of everything, actually, under a sky which approves. Because I like to imagine, to think, to feel that the sky approves of what Barragan did here. It's some kind of a stage design in order to emphasize the unity of everything, animal, man, wall, trees, and so on. Is the unity of everything. Now I imagine the horses enjoy themselves here. Beautiful horse. Now, I don't know if this was done with his knowledge. You know, he died some years ago, but anyway. What I see in his works is an attempt to bring back vita contemplativa. I keep mentioning this vita contemplativa, and maybe I could be a little bit tiring certain people, but this is what I see. He's trying to recuperate what was lost, and what was lost was exactly this, the contemplative part of life. And this is why his architecture is considered poetical and emotionally charged, exactly because he was able to address a function of life which is very often, unfortunately, neglected. And here is the architect. It's a famous picture with him. Unfortunately, I should have had one larger one, but he's meditative. Is a man who meditates, who thinks. His head is lower than he thinks. He thinks deeply, he feels. Another house from 1975, 1977. I think we are approaching the end of the presentation on Luis Barragan. This one is also magical. I don't know exactly how this functions in the context of Mexico, the climate. You know, he has this static water inside the house, and but what I see here is it's pure magic. You know, it's really, it goes beyond the realm of the, you know, what is imagined as you know, the possible. It's done with very simple means, but this is surrealism. It is surrealism on earth, so to speak. And I had a feeling here even that the water is actually filling even this corridor which leads to this room, which is a room clearly destined for meditation. I mean, what would its function be? So here is the plan. So this must be it. This corridor that we see here, and the room with the blue and the red and with the water is here. Number 10. What is its function? It says corridor, but the corridor is actually here. No, it's not corridor, it says something else, comedor. I don't know what that means. You know, to have rooms just like the room of the afternoon or the afternoon room, this room, and in fact, I am very curious now to know what that word means. But it seems he pushed forward the idea of having certain functions which commonly are not addressed. And the courtyards are magical. I mean, that tree is, I am sure that tree, I know I'm saying something which cannot be verified, but the tree probably feels very honored by the architect through, I don't know how to put it, you know. I have a feeling that, I mean, the respect of the architect for the tree is shown in this picture very well. And it is this reverence for everything in a way, you know, for, I mean, not for everything, but for certain things. This cohabitation between man and the building and artifacts and nature is an equilibrium here that is done with simplicity, but is no way a simplistic architecture. No, it's not, and it's not a minimalist architecture either. Sorry about this. So you know that magical room, Sarali's room, is here. This is the yellow corridor. And then, yeah, this is the courtyard with the tree, which is here. I'm talking about this. And so this corridor leads into that room with that incredible surrealist meeting between the water and the red wall and the blue wall and so on. I will let you discover for the other things about this house. Here is maybe a better plan. This one also has 3 floors. I mean, these are not very small houses, but he was a poet, obviously, a poet in architecture, and that's why he is so valued. Towards the outside, besides the pink, I don't know. We couldn't really say if it's a great building or not. Towards the street, it's not his intention to impress, you know, the man on the street, no, or the tourist. Casa Aguilarti, Luis Barragan, Mexico, 1976. He died 12 years later. Here is again the plan. This one is a little easier to read than the previous plans. So now I understand, actually this yellow corridor goes first through an intermediate space where there is a table with 4 chairs, and that magical room, as I called it, the surrealist room, is here. So it's again about contemplation. This space here, its function seems to be just that, contemplation. Like his friends Luis Kahn, Barragan also seems to value or to have valued silence, because when I look at these pictures, I am inclined to say that he valued silence. the meeting between light and silence, just like in the works of Louis Kahn. Yes, this is this is the magical piece of this whole house. Now another, this is the last work I show, and it seems his creative powers became a little bit, I don't know what to say. This work doesn't seem to have the same poetical intensity like the previous works. It's his last work, I think. He was already almost 80, and it's fine, but I don't know. I don't think it was him who did this, you know, these things here now. And also there are impure elements here. It doesn't look like a genuine Louis Barragan. I even wondered, and now Sotheby's, you know, they are busying themselves selling this house, and I'm sure it was affected by certain interventions that do not belong to Louis Barragan. So we are looking at an impure work here. This is what I'm tempted to think. And this is the last picture on the presentation on Louis Barragan with the architect. Is a strange picture because the edge of his head is coincides with the edge of the tree, and I can't figure out if the man is behind the tree or the tree is behind the man. But I like the picture nevertheless. Maybe because of it, I don't know. There is a certain ambiguity here. There isn't too much ambiguity about the way he opened his shirt, but you know, unbuttoned his shirt. But you know, in the climate of Mexico, I think is not to be judged too harshly. Anyway. And now, if you still have time, I will make the presentation on, although I didn't expect to last so long, the one on Barragan, although he deserves it. But if some of you still want to watch Edward Darrell Stone, I will do it. I'm not sure I do the right thing because maybe it will create some noise, so to speak, but I will do it quicker. And after all, he was born on the same day and the same year, 1902, the 9th of March. Edward Darrell Stone, he had a strange biography, professional. He studied even at Harvard, at MIT, but he didn't get a diploma. Anyway, was an American architect known for the formal, highly decorative buildings he designed in the 50s and 60s. His works include the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the United States Embassy in New Delhi, about which Frank Lloyd Wright actually said it was one of the most beautiful buildings he ever saw. But he made this statement when he was over 90. The Keller Center at the University of Chicago, which unfortunately is not in this presentation, and I regret, and the John Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. Here he was the man, the modernist, populist architect. It's almost a contradiction in terms. The moderns were supposed to be not quite populist because they were, you know, avant-garde, so to speak, those who were, and, you know, there was that épatait la bourgeoisie. But he was a man who tried to conciliate with the bourgeoisie. Although I read at one moment that he went to a party and there was a critic of him, you know, a critic who was not gentle towards him. And apparently he said, There are three things that are overestimated or over-evaluated. Architecture, and then he added something like the fucking king. I mean, it was just the letter F and then a few little stars, and then the name of the critic. But isn't it strange that the populist architect said that the architecture is overestimated, overvalued? He used a similar word, which I don't remember, but with this very meaning. He built a lot. I mean, he built probably 10 times more, if not 20 times more than Luis Barragan. This is a fragment from the New Delhi embassy, the American embassy. And this is a bizarre picture, which I wanted to include because we talk about climate change and sustainability and pollution. This is one of his houses that was abandoned. And look at this. Can you believe it? Can you believe that something like this happens? You know, I read that in Sweden, I read just a few hours ago that in Sweden, there are no slums. And there are no slums because society doesn't accept that people have nowhere to sleep or they sleep in, inadequate places and so on. And, you know, how come that one of the richest countries in the world would allow for something like this? And this is just an example. I mean, there are many examples that one can find. But anyway, this was a house designed by Edward Darrell Stone that was abandoned, and this is how it looked at a certain point. I hope it doesn't still look in this way. The earliest work where he was a senior designer before he started his own practice was this famous building actually in Manhattan, Radio City Music Hall from 1932, and is a very valued, performing arts place. Radio City Music Hall and the Center Theater at Rockefeller Center in New York. He worked as a senior designer in the employ of the Rockefeller Center Associated Architects. Together with Donald Desky, he was the interior designer and had a very important role, and the other person, Eugene Schoen, they were both interior designers, but Donald Desky apparently did a magnificent job there. But the architect, the senior architect designer was Stone. Upon opening its door for the first time on a rainy winter's night in 1932, the Radio City Music Hall in Manhattan was proclaimed so extraordinarily beautiful as to need no performance at all. This is amusing. The first built component of the massive Rockefeller Center, the music hall, so again, it was built in 1932, almost 100 years ago, has been the world's largest indoor theater for over 8 years, with its elegant Art Deco interiors and complex stage machinery. The theater defied tradition to set a new standard for modern entertainment venues that remains to this day. And here is the building, and some people on the streets before the pandemic, strange, drawing, maybe accurate, but a little bit confusing. Anyway, it's kind of interesting, visceral. And then industrialist, a few things about this building. Industrialist and noted philanthropist John D. Rockefeller Jr. was approached in 1928 by a group of leading New York citizens seeking to build a new opera house for the Metropolitan Opera Company. Though Rockefeller himself was not particularly concerned with opera, his sense of civic duty and the favorable economic climate of the late 20s convinced him to support the project. In October of that year, he signed a lease with Columbia University for a parcel of land in Midtown Manhattan. Unfortunately, in fighting between members of the Opera Committee and the stock market crash of 1929 led to the project's demise, leaving Rockefeller with a long-term lease that cost him $3.3 million a year. This is the building, the inside, and decoration or a symbol or a logo, or I don't know what it is. Some pictures from this look quite intimate, almost like a private room. This is truly a very large theater, as you can see. you barely see actually in this imperfect image. Anyway, he was young. He was 29 years old, senior designer when he did this work, Edward Stone. I'm beginning to forget certain names after, there are so many names. Navigating between them is a little bit difficult sometimes. Edward Darrell Stone. So this is the Radio City Hall at night, and it's not an accident that at night is more inciting in a way than during the day. But the space, the theater itself is impressive even today. So we are in Manhattan. We are looking at a building built in 1932, and it still functions. Art Deco in some parts, at least in some parts. I go a little quicker because it is a little bit late, and I apologize. I wanted to pay homage to both architects. Maybe I chose wrongly. Maybe I should have limited myself to Louis Barragan. Now a house from 1933, a modernistic house. He took a trip through Europe and he was very impressed by the international style. This is not quite international style, but it's very modernistic and valued as such by Sotheby's and other, firms interested in speculative buyings and sellings. It's not a bad building, by the way. He was friends with Frank Lloyd Wright, and I don't know if I have here a picture. I saw a picture with him and Frank Lloyd Wright and his wife. I mean, the wife of Darrell Stone in a restaurant. I'm surprised that actually that Frank Lloyd Wright appreciated so much an architect to say, another architect, meaning not himself, to say that his building is one of the most beautiful buildings he ever saw. I'm talking about the American Embassy in New Delhi, in India. A sketch, and the sketch it is indeed by Darrell Stone. Again, the house, an early house, 1933. But it passes the test of time, I think. It's still, it has a certain level of freshness, maybe not the photograph itself from the interior, but from the exterior, the color ones. The Museum of Modern Art in New York, he had an associate architect, as you can see, 1937. He did, I think, a good job. He didn't work alone, so I don't know, but this is a modernism which is still convincing, I would say. The very famous MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. And now you see all kinds of buildings around there. Jean Nouvel with his modernist Gothicism. I love that tower by Jean Nouvel. And then interventions by Diller and Scofidio inside the building and so on. The Museum of Modern Art deserves a presentation just about it. And there are within the museum, this is for the Romanians present here, sculptures by Brâncuș, some birds and some, the collection is impressive. Okay, now this is another modernistic house. So we look here at a very different architect from Louis Barragan, but quite capable himself, and building very differently from Barragan, maybe less poetically, less mystically, less spiritually, but still an architecture that is not succumbing to less than what is supposed to be, I think. Although the language is a little bit, predictable at times, but we move on. He was born today, so I thought of presenting his work as well. Now, this is an interesting house for 1954. We are from the 30s to the 50s because it was the Second World War, and I don't know what else he did. This is a house I understood he built. He wanted to use a modernistic language, but the neighbors protested. They wanted something vernacular to match their houses. So the architect compromised, and I think he did a good house. It is somehow modern in its, simple geometry, but it could also connect with what we might call the vernacular. And it has this archetypal simplicity, which is, I think, a quality. It's not bad, I think. And I think even the Japanese might have liked it. And the interior is interesting too. Now, the US Embassy in New Delhi, about which Frank Lloyd Wright said that is one of the most beautiful buildings he ever saw. I don't know. That's what I read. But I don't know. I don't know if, maybe at 90, Frank Lloyd Wright became a little bit less toxic in his negativity and more generous towards other people. It is a good building. It is. And I would say it's better than what Walter Gropius did also in terms of an embassy. But I don't know. Is it one of the most beautiful buildings we ever saw? I don't know about that. I think his attempt to bring in ornamentation or decoration is a good one, but unfortunately, I think he does it a little bit too placidly and too predictably, too statically. I don't know. But this screen he also used for his own house in Manhattan. We are going to see it. The columns are kind of interesting. I mean, they're simple, but they have a certain, the slenderness is I think, a quality. Here is the architect in a happy mood. Again, the United States Embassy in New Delhi from the 50s by Edward Darrell Stone. He was valued by presidents. You will see maybe here a picture also with Eisenhower, and he had an immense success. One said, this architect had in his office projects in the making in the value of billions of dollars. So you can imagine, as opposed to the introverted, meditative, solitary Mexican architect. We just look at this picture. It amused me, so I place it here. It's in front of his building, the embassy in New Delhi. The Stanford Medical Center in Palo Alto, California, also with his signature screened main facade, decorative. As opposed to Frank Lloyd Wright, who also used sometimes, especially in his woven or textile houses in California, Darrell Stone uses these concrete elements, but rather statically. He said something like he wanted to go beyond the transitory enthusiasms of modernism. Well, it is amusing how he put it, the transitory enthusiasms of modernism. In other words, he was also searching for timelessness, the way Gehry would, although Gehry in a less explicit way. So, in a way, just like Luis Barragan, he fought against the simplistic understanding of modernism, and he wanted to go beyond it. And we see clearly here there is decoration, there is ornamentation, something that Orthodox modernism banished. But not all architects were happy about this. Barragan was not, and Edward Darrell Stone either. Now you see his own house in Manhattan. This is it. In fact, I didn't have to tell you, it's clearly his. In fact, he just veiled his house. His house is veiled. It has a veil. And behind it is whatever it is. Here it is, the bedroom with a, a little bit of a kitsch mirror and what can we say? Opulence, affluence, large mirrors, you know, flamboyance behind that screen, and the terrace. He was doing well, obviously, and you know, a table for either conferences or dining or whatever. Rather narrow the plot of land, but still we are talking about a good house. Now we are approaching the work of that Romanian that I told you about, who deserves to be known as much as Frederick Isler. But first, let's look at the US Pavilion in Brussels in 1958 in Belgium. This is by Edward Darrell Stone, and I understood it was, as I read, partially demolished. Whatever that means. I mean, how could you partially demolish this thing, which is, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I read that it was partially demolished, and it was a big building, as you can see, quite big, but we'll see the building by Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis, and we see two different creators, very different. But still, this big building by Edward Darrell Stone didn't deserve or was not punished with a total demolition, only a partial one, which is still something because most buildings in most international exhibitions are simply flattened by the bulldozer. Now, because I take the occasion because this was the exhibition of 1958 in Brussels in Belgium. And I want to show this brilliant, brilliant, brilliant work by Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis, who was born in Brăila in Romania, and he lived for 11 years in Brăila. So he was kind of formed from Greek parents, it's true. And then he flew to, or, you know, took the train to Greece and then disappeared from here. But Yanis Xenakis apparently was the true author of this building. And it might be that actually this building, I don't know. I say something adventurous now or adventurously, but in my opinion, is one of the best buildings by Le Corbusier, if not the best. And it seems, and I have the highest affection and respect and enthusiast was Le Corbusier, but the kind of work they built here belongs more to the preoccupations of Yanis Xenakis than to what Le Corbusier was doing. Kind of similar to that tower that Louis Kahn did with Anting. If those any of you remember the presentation on Louis Kahn, Kahn didn't work in that way. It was Anting. In this case, Le Corbusier didn't work in this way, and you see the pavilion. It was Yanis Xenakis who worked in this way. And by the way, Yanis Xenakis was also one of the best composers of avant-garde music in the second half of the 20th century. This is the pavilion. Now, look at this building and look at this building. So here is Edward Darrell Stone, and here is Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis. This is the difference. This is the difference between two architects. Here we have, in my opinion, Yanis Xenakis. Well, Yanis Xenakis also worked alone, and he worked less brilliantly alone than when he worked with Le Corbusier. So I think the vicinity of Le Corbusier was more than beneficial. But it doesn't matter. They designed this building, which was brilliant, and this was destroyed. Look at the plans. Mathematics was used, and this is how Xenakis worked. This is not how Le Corbusier worked. Look at the model. How could they demolish such a building? I don't understand. So it was on the same, in the same exhibition in 1958 in Brussels that Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis, Brăila-born Yanis Xenakis, built this thing. This should be rebuilt, in my opinion. It should be rebuilt. Look at the plan. It's pure poetry. It's freedom. It's lyrical. It's magnificent. And look at it during construction. Also, it was very rigorous because it was based on mathematics. But it's free. It's order and disorder at the same time. And of course, there was no pandemic then, so people were, flocking to see all these buildings. But if you compare the Edward Darrell Stone with what Corbusier and Yannis Xenakis did, you understand the difference between adventurous architects, truly adventurous, or acrobats, as Le Corbusier might call them. I love this picture. It's done by a good photographer. And Edward Darrell Stone, who did a more conventional structure. And here they are. On the left, Le Corbusier, on the right, Yannis Xenakis. What is strange about this picture is that we look at two men, two architects, but both together have only two eyes. I mean, two functioning eyes. Le Corbusier blinded himself strangely at 28. So from 28 on, only one eye, I think the left eye was functioning. And Yannis Xenakis unfortunately lost his sight in one eye in the Second World War. I don't know exactly in what circumstances, but it moves me, this picture. Maybe that's why Le Corbusier hired Yannis Xenakis in the first place. Anyway, two brilliant men together coming here to the train station, probably after a meeting about the Philips Pavilion. And here you see them again with a model of the Philips Pavilion. So here is Le Corbusier, always very polite, taking his hat off in interior spaces. And behind him, the Braila-born young architect. I don't even know if he studied architecture. I don't think he did. I don't know what he studied. But anyway, this is Yannis Xenakis. Okay, moving forward, the first Unitarian Society church in this place. And I never knew, I know the place, but I always had difficulties to read this word. In New York, 1958, the horizontal church, if I can call it so, very horizontal. Usually churches want to be tall, but look, Edward Darrell Stone, who was capable of being unconventional himself, and this is just an example, who would have said that this is a church? Well, it is a church. He also uses ornamentation on this wall, long wall, horizontal wall, which is also a deviation from the dogmas of the modern movement. Now a building which is very famous in New York, the Gallery of Modern Art, it was initially called so. Now it's called the Museum of Arts and Design from 1958, but it was substantially altered in 2006. I don't know what those alterations were, but we'll see the building as it was in 1958, facing Central Park. I don't think I would have thought that this was built by Philip Johnson, but now was built by Edward Darrell Stone. Was never one of my favorite architects, but I still think we should acknowledge even those we might not sympathize fully with, at least to know their works. And then, we might be in a better position to express ourselves vis-a-vis them. Okay. Now the international trademark, known now as the Four Seasons Hotel in New Orleans in Louisiana from 1959. This is beginning to look a little bit like Las Vegas, and I don't know. It's an architecture that I don't have a great respect for, but he did better, even taller buildings. There is a great skyscraper in the General Motors skyscraper in Manhattan, which is much better than this one. It would have been better if he didn't have this melodrama at the top, but that's my opinion. The Harvey Mudd College at Claremont, he kind of arrived at a language, as Peter Eisenman called it. He said, if you want to be successful, discover or build or invent a language. And he gave us an example, the ex-president of the United States, Peter Eisenman, said he generated his own language, and look, he became the president of the United States. That's what Peter Eisenman said. So he has a language, his own language, Darrell Stone here, and sometimes he repeats it maybe a little bit indiscriminately, but he built so much. I mean, just private houses, he built maybe 10 times more, 5-10 times more than Louis Barragan. I only showed 2 or 3, but 3 actually. but he built many. There is a site called US Modernist, and there you can see all his private houses. Now, North Carolina State Legislative Building from 1960. The plan is kind of nice, it's symmetrical, but there is order here. There is a sense of order, and at the same time, it is not, I don't know, it seems inciting and exciting and even graphically engaging. I like the plan. And this is the view from the air. Again, he seemed to like horizontality, although he was also capable of doing tall buildings. And the General Motors skyscraper in Manhattan is an excellent example. Apparently, one of the most expensive, to rent spaces within the General Motors skyscraper, which occupies a whole block in Manhattan, is very expensive. Still, anyway, this is a governmental building in North Carolina. Edward Darrell Stone. We move forward with a certain speed. The Beckman Auditorium of the California Institute of Technology, Pasadena, California. This is kind of interesting, although I don't know. I felt like smiling a little bit, and I don't know. I mean, I better not elaborate what I feel like smiling, but still very different from Louis Barragan. That's obvious, and very, very, very different from Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis. But it has character. It has personality itself, and I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, and now we see the water that we saw in Louis Barragan here as well, in Louis Barragan and in Edward Darrell Stone. Maybe some unconsciously he knew that he was born on the same day and the same year, except that this water certainly doesn't serve for horses to nourish themselves from. The kind of interesting, the ceiling though, and the roof. Anyway, moving forward, no pandemic here, which is a good thing. And National Geographic Society Museum in Washington, D.C. from 1961. He did many buildings like this, kind of similar, powerful, ordered, prismatic buildings. He was a man quite capable of being the man at the right time, at the right place, in the right place. But who knows? It's difficult to know the nature of someone. The Museo de Arte in Ponce, Puerto Rico, 1961. Interesting how he brings natural light above that painting. So Puerto Rico here, Museum of Art there, and here is the man on the cover of the Time magazine. He doesn't look very happy, but he does look like an intense man. State University of New York at Albany, 1962. Interesting site planning here. And I think he had qualities as an architect, and he was able to negotiate between the actual part of the building and the intermediate spaces, like here, and these intermediate spaces, half outdoor, half indoor, offer value to the work. Now, the prosaic functionalists might say these are lost spaces. I don't know. You could also say the fountains are lost, or it's true. Energy is consumed to bring that water upwards, but what can we do? If you want fountains, you need some energy consumed. The John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, 1962. You can see his language already. Here he is with the President Eisenhower and his wife, the wife of the president, and the architect on the left, respectful and dressed well, with a model of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. You see, we are in Washington, D.C., and another big building by this architect, and the view from the interior. Now the Prince George Center, also known as now known as the University Town Center, in this place in Maryland. Large buildings, of course. Can you imagine Luis Barragan doing something like this? I read that Luis Barragan was offered the job in Houston, in Texas, and he refused to take it. He said, I cannot do it because I have nothing to start from. In other words, he was not rooted in that place, in that culture. And Houston, apparently, for him, didn't offer him that something that he needed in order to start from. A building from Pakistan by Edward Darrell Stone, similar a little bit, but strangely a little bit more modernistic and a little bit more idiosyncratically expressive compared to what he built in the United States. This is in Pakistan, and I understood the Pakistanis are very proud of this building. Okay, a museum in Nebraska, using the same architectural language that I mentioned, a view during the day and the view during the night. He was a classicist. He wanted to bring modernism, to have the aura of what is called classicism without renouncing the precepts of modernism, or not too much. This is the School of Theology in Claremont, California. It's not a bad building, actually, and it's kind of interesting and a little bit different from the other buildings he built, and those two trees are also magical. So for the Theological Society, and again, something he was good at, Darrell Stone, as at these, pergolas and these outdoor spaces that negotiate between the outside and the inside. And I like this. Now the Davenport Public Library in Iowa, 1964. What can we say? Yes. Maybe we could say a decent modernistic work, maybe, with a carpet that maybe was less, problematic than the carpet Rem Koolhaas used in his library in Seattle, designed, I understood, by his girlfriend. So the General Motors building, I really think that he did a good job here. It's a very impressive skyscraper built together with Emory Roth and Sons. Associated Architects in 1964. Look at this. I mean, I am not a great fan of capitalism, but I have to say this building has a virile verticality that is not to be undervalued, I think. I think it's well done, and it's a simple architectural language. He didn't want here to be too so-called classical. And I think that's a good thing, because this build doesn't have the idiosyncrasies of the building at Columbus too, that so-called Gallery of Art, which is the Museum of Architecture and Design. The Garden State Art Center in this place in Jersey, now it's called the Bank Art Center. And you see it's covered, but it has also a large open space covered where you can participate to certain shows. And I myself don't believe that I actually ended this presentation. I think I did, yes. So thank you very much. Sorry, it was a little bit long and maybe not I didn't organize it as well as I could have maybe, but